Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Board Games Hitting My Table. So in this series I take a look at all of the games that I've been playing over the last couple of weeks. This episode covering the second half of August 2023. Now before I get started on the games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in my show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get started with Manila. So Manila is a relatively unknown game. It's a kind of a betting and somewhat push your luck game, as these three barges will be travelling up this river track, and you are betting on which ones of these barges are going to finish. You can bet on them earlier and get kind of a cheaper fee, I suppose. You can bet on how many boats are going to finish the race. You can bet on how many don't finish the race. You can take a bit of a punt and try to kick people off the boats if they land on a very specific spot. But I do quite like the way this game works. It's definitely one of those games where kind of at the halfway point you start to become a bit more invested. You're trying to squeeze every single penny you can out of the game. And there are also a few more extra wrinkles where at the start of each round you can kind of bid on trying to be the captain of the ships, which will give certain boats advantages or disadvantages based on their starting position. And you can also acquire these shares in the boats where if you invest early, where of course, less information is available, the bigger returns you can get at the end, if they end up climbing up these tracks, because every time one of these boats finishes the race, they'll kind of go up in terms of their stock price. And that's pretty much the gist of the game. It has a lot of similarities to a game called Camel Up. I think Camel Up is maybe a little bit more refined than this one, but this one still does have its upsides. It's got great production. Again, it's pretty hard to get hold of, but it's still a lot of fun. And again, at that kind of halfway point in the game, I find myself getting quite invested with this one. So that is Manila. Played a nice 3-player game of that one that was pretty tight. I also played a 3-player game of Alice's Garden. So this is one of my favourites polyomino style games, one that I don't really see covered on too many other outlets, I suppose. This one, are you not only trying to place these polyomino shapes within the confines of the grid you have, but on those polyomino shapes you have kind of sub-shapes on them which will score in different ways. For example, you ought to be trying to get these roses together. You ought to be trying to get these mushrooms in columns. I'll just show you a couple of the tiles here as examples. You've got these cards which can give you these kind of odd pieces. You've got these trees where you ought to be having them as far apart as possible. So it's quite nice that you have kind of systems within systems here with how these tiles work. It's a very quick game. It kind of gives me that that Calico feeling where the more you play the game, the more restrictive the game becomes, or as the game plays on in terms of its game length, it becomes more restricted because your options are quickly squeezed. But I do like this one a lot. It's definitely one of those games that leaves you quite uncomfortable and it can stress you out because there's never that optimal tile to place, but I love it for that. So I had a really good fun game of this one, and we always have a laugh at this because I remember quite a few plays of this ago I had a really good score, and since then I've never been able to have an even respectable score. But still, this is a fantastic filler game if you like your polyomino style fillers. Also played I think it was a 3-player game of Flea Market. This is another game that has just grown on me so much over time. I really do think this game is quite good, and I think it's very charming. So this one, you are bidding for these different kind of bits of junk, I suppose. And the way these come up for auction is that you're going to roll these trio of dice, and the combination value of those dice is going to show which item comes up for auction. And then everybody's going to roll their individual pair of dice, and depending on who's rolled the most or the highest value, they are going to get first refusal paying that amount. So if I rolled a 12, then I can bid for it first or pay for it first, but I have to pay 12. Then it might say fall to the next person who might have rolled a 7. They could pay 7. So it kind of has this chicken mechanism where, do I want to pay this extra fee, or my opponent's going to get it for really cheap? And of course you have to factor in things such as the probabilities of these items coming up for auction again. This game is just, I don't know, there's something about it that I think is quite magical. And I'm really becoming a fan of it. So a lovely game. And it's always quite interesting how there's numbers that shouldn't be rolled so often, how they can really end up paying dividends if you take a bit of a speculative punt. But that is Flea Market, criminally underrated, fun family filler game with some dice rolling and a lot of luck. Talking about lucky filler games, we played some more of The Number. This one, I'm really just smashing out the plays of this one because you can get it played so quickly. I think this most recent play that we've had, because we've played this so often now, or quite often, and we're kind of starting to build a bit of a meta game where we are writing numbers down that are so much closer than they ever have been. So that extra decision space of just undercutting your opponent to make your score legal and to make you eligible for scoring is becoming that much more important. If you don't know what this game is all about, maybe check out my review, but you are simply writing 3 numbers on these sheets, you're then revealing them simultaneously, and whoever's written the highest number that doesn't have a single duplicate number on it with the cards below it, then they're going to score some bonus points as well as the first digit in that number. It's really fun. It's got a real unique vibe to it, and I think it's wonderful. Definitely going to be a Marmite style game. You either love it or you hate it, but I am definitely a lover of it. So that is The Number. More fillers now with some more Valara. This one is a lovely simultaneous selection style game. As you're playing these kind of fantasy characters out, trying to score them as optimally as you can. They all have a unique number on them, and they also have a unique power on them. The lower the number is great because you get first dibs on these scoring cards, but the higher the number generally have better powers, which can give you cool things. And they all interact with each other in weird and wonderful ways, as you'd expect with games like Citadels or Libertalia. This is kind of more of a compact and concise version of those games, and I prefer this one to those other ones that I've mentioned because of those reasons. It's so accessible, it's quick. The scoring cards they're okay. I think there's even more potential to add expansion material into this one just through new scoring cards. I think that alone will be interesting. But that's pretty much what I have to say on the game. It's very simple, but it's a great example of a simultaneous selection game. We've played some more Rumble Nation, always a favourite of the channel. Rumble Nation, one of the most underrated and unknown, really, area control games, as you're rolling dice, deploying troops onto the grid here, onto the map, sorry. When you roll these dice, one of them is going to show the area you go into, and the other one is going to show how many cubes you put in there. Then you're going to resolve them, going from lowest to highest, and taking the scoring tokens. But whenever you score a region, you will spawn additional cubes into the adjacent regions if you've won it. So it definitely has this huge crescendo, a huge kind of a cascading effect that is, I don't think I've ever seen replicated in another game. This was probably one of the closest games of this I've ever had. I don't tend to do very well at this game. I think it's probably the highest I've ever scored, but I still didn't win because only one player managed to sneak in to the 12 region, which of course was 12 uncontested points, which was just game breaking. And I tend to house rule this by not putting in these special cards, which tend to mitigate those luck factors. But I actually quite like that excitement of who is going to roll the 12 first. Am I going to roll a double and try to get that 12 to sneak in there and get all those points? Yes, it is a lot more swingier that way, but I think I prefer it because it's just that much easier to get to the table without having to know how each of the cards work. But this is an epic game. I love it so much, and probably one of the best versions of a 30-minute game you can play. That is Rumble Nation. I've played some more Botswana. So I haven't played Botswana for a while. I just thought I'd pull this one off the shelf and get it played. This one of Rani Kenichi's simplest games, and probably one of the simplest games in my collection. All you're doing is you have a hand of animal cards, you're playing one out, and then you're picking up any animal of your choice. And at the end of the game, once all the cards of a certain animal has been played, each animal you've collected is going to be worth a number of points equal to the most recent played animal card. Very close games here because you can quite openly, it's quite a transparent game, you can work out what everything is going to be worth, but always just that last card played can really mess up everybody's plans, so you need to time it just right. Very simple one. One of the coolest, one of the funniest versions of production that I've seen with this version of Botswana, because you have these pretty superfluous toys here you'd probably have as a kid, but they just add a bit of a charm to the game. And I believe this game is getting reprinted this year or next year with some lovely artwork. So if this one appeals to you, maybe check out those new versions. I've also played a 3-player game of Thinker. It's a very simple resource collection game as you're cashing them in to fulfill these public contracts. A lovely bright visual appeal, and this is the first time I've played this game with 3 players, and this game is generally considered best at 2, and I would probably agree with that. With a light kind of emphasis, because I think it's still really good at 3. It's just that the rundown becomes a little bit more chaotic with 3, and it becomes a little bit less cerebral, I think, because with 2 players you can probably see what players want or what your opponent wants, and you can try and play accordingly. Whereas 3 players, that extra player in the mix does, just spice things up a little bit and makes it a little less predictable. But I still think it's lovely. It's definitely got a nice flow to it. Just collecting loads of resources by collecting them on the rondel, cashing in these contracts, and scoring points in the process, collecting sets, and so on. Very simple stuff. I still am yet to review this one, so I will be sure to do that soon now that I've played it at 2 and 3 players. I probably won't get to play it at 4 players, but it's going to be pretty much the same feeling as 3 players anyway. So I'll share my thoughts very soon in depth on Thinker. On to a very small game now. So we played a 3-player game of Pungi. So this is a game that's feather light. It kind of has a trick-taking feel to it, as you have these different suits of cards. What you're trying to do is you're trying to place certain numbers to collect these snake cards, which are going to be your points, basically. But basically, if you play a certain number and then somebody follows you, the same suits are going to be stronger than suits that don't match anybody else's. So it's kind of like this trumping system. And then you are going to be collecting snakes depending on the order in which you've played these cards. Now, the game is fine. I think the decision space is nearly non-existent, but I think a big part of that might be because of the player count. I think this game is going to be much better at 4 or 5 players, because this does tailor 3 to 5. Because at that 3-player count, it seems like you have very little control if you are the first player, because the other players can conspire with each other, and they can pretty much render your choice pretty much useless. Whereas if you're last, you have a lot of say in how these cards are divided. So I think I can't really recommend it on that respect, and there are better small box games out there, but I still would be intrigued to try it at that 4 or 5 player count, for those reasons. Staying with tiny box games, we played a 3-player game of Startups. Now this is a game that definitely peaks at 3 players. I'd also play it at 4, but the game actually does scale up to 7, which I think is pretty ludicrous. But this is one of the best games by Oink. It's kind of like a set collection game with an economic edge to it, as you have these different companies with these really cool cards, and you are trying to get the most shares in these companies by having the most cards of them. However, you only score points if other players have also invested. So it has this kind of chicken mechanism where if you have all the shares of a company, that's not exactly great because you're getting no points for it. But say I had 5 shares and my opponent had 4 shares in a company, then that's great, because for every share they have, because they haven't got the maximum, they're going to have to pay me some points. And that's how this game played out. So basically all these different companies have a different amount of cards in the deck. And both me and my mum hotly contested the big company and just went fully committed to it, and hopefully we pulled out the win. I managed to get 5 cards, she got 4 cards, therefore I had a huge swing of points there. But still, the rest of it was very tight, but it was quite nice that we went all in, and it worked out for one of us. But if you don't know about this game and you like Oink games, trust me, this is one of the best ones, especially at that 3-player count. This is up there with Scout, just up there with Maskmen. Even though they are completely different games than this one, I think this is one of the best in their line of games. I've played a 3-player game of Royal Realms. Now, this is obviously not the real box here, and I'll put some images up on the screen now. Royal Realms is a game that I have recently reviewed on the channel, actually, after being posted a review copy of the game. It's kind of an auction and set collection game, as you're bidding for these cards, these kind of gem cards, and they come in different colours and different numbers, and you're trying to create these chains either of the same numbers, the same numbers but the different colours, but also consecutive numbers at the same time. It kind of has a high society vibe to it, as you get rewarded extra points if you have the most money at the end. You suffer negative points if you spend the most money. And in this one, you can even stash money away to get these wild cards to symbolise any colour or any number, which are particularly powerful. It's a lovely game. I think the rules are very dodgy in it. it's pretty obvious how it should play, but some of the the way it's been written down isn't crystal clear, but you can fill in the gaps yourself. But if you like simple card games with a bidding element to it, this is a really good one. I don't think it's quite as refined or as polished as the aforementioned High Society, and I would choose that one over this one. But if you want an alternative that's very affordable, then check out Royal Realms, because it's a very good one. I also played a 3-player game of a Long Shot the Dice game. This was just to finish up a games night. I think we just needed enough time to just fill up that remaining time we had. This is such an enjoyable racing game, and it's quite a dynamic game we had here, because I think one of the pieces that came second in the end, they never rolled their number or their colour of horse at all, and they purely came second based on being pulled along by the other horses. But this is kind of like a roll and write racing game and betting game, as horses are of course going to go around the track, and you're betting on them. You can collect these different kind of symbols to give them boosts and push them back, and buy horses, and if you get a podium finish, you're going to get some extra points there. Lightning quick, scales amazingly. I think even at 2 or 3 players, it's still a hell of a lot of fun. But even at up to 7 or 8 players, which this one does accommodate, it's still a fantastic game. Absolutely quintessential, almost essential for the game that you should have in your collection. It is magnificent, and I love it a lot. Played a 3-player game of Vikings. Vikings, a game I always speak highly of. One of Michael Kiesling's best, if not his best. This is a kind of a family plus level tile placement game, as you're building your own little personal grid here. Making these islands, putting Vikings on them. All the Vikings have different roles. The black Vikings fight off these ships. The red Vikings and green Vikings get you points. The yellow Vikings give you money. And the blue Vikings you have to use to feed all the other ones or suffer negative points at the end. And you even have these grey Vikings, which can ship the Vikings off later in the game if you didn't have the space available at the time. A wonderful drafting system, as the Vikings and the tiles come hand in hand. And a dynamic market as well, as the cheaper ones get bought, or the cheaper tiles, this rotates and makes the more expensive ones cheaper again. It's just an absolutely, well, it's so refined. It is, I think it's close to perfect, this game, to be honest. Bridges that gap wonderfully between accessible games and heavyweight games as well. This particular game we played, I think I ended up squeezing the win. Because I did have quite a strong monopoly on the money characters. As my opponents were getting more and more points and stuff, I was starting to build up that engine of money, and it meant that at the second half of the game I was could buy what I wanted without much competition. But it is nice that you can go different routes. I mean, I think one of my opponents really did specialise in building these sets, because these I think it's the green Vikings, they score points based on not only themselves, but also the people below them. And they ended up buying, I think it was like 4 complete columns of those, which is quite a lot of points. So it was really nice how we went different routes, and it ended up being a close game. But the money management in the first half was quite difficult, because I had so many of those yellow Vikings. This one is great. Please get this reprinted. I would love to see this one be in more gamers' hands, because this one could be as big as a game like Wingspan. I definitely believe that, because it ticks all those boxes for those kind of games with mass market appeal, but to still have longevity and can appeal to gamers as well. It is that good. That is Vikings. And the final game of my own I have played is a 3-player game of Babylonia. So Babylonia, one of my favourite Reiner Knizia games. I think it might still be ranked my favourite at the moment. It's very close with Ra. They're both up there with my top 10, 15 games. They're both absolutely incredible. There's no board artwork here, but this is basically, it has the route building style vibe of games like Through the Desert, games like Blue Lagoon. This one I think is better than all of them. You are basically trying to create these chains of symbols. You're trying to surround these ziggurats and get bonus powers. You're trying to collect these city tokens and get kind of compounding rewards on these tiles you're collecting. It is just one of the best kind of gain and loss benefits you have to weigh up. You know, by going here, this is great, but I'm going to give up that space over there. The board is way tighter than appears at first sight, and it's quite an interesting approach here. You know, I started the game going for those cities. I got a bit of an engine going. One of my opponents was really focusing on surrounding those ziggurats and got loads of points that way. And I think my third opponent, who won the game by quite a big margin, really did focus on building up those routes much better than we did. So that ended up costing us quite dearly in the end. But this game is close to perfect. In fact, I would probably consider it perfect. It is so amazingly good. One of the best games ever created. And, you know, that is saying something because I've played a lot of games. So if you don't know about this one, and you like it is an abstract game, but it has a pure beauty to it that is just absolutely outstanding. And, you know, it's one of the best games I have. That is Babylonia. And just a couple of games that I played from my friend's collection. We played a 3-player game of Smartphone Inc. with the expansion, which makes it a lot tighter for 3 players. So we played using that type map. I think we played a couple of the new technologies as well. I really do like that overlapping system of the tablets you have, and as your action selection system in smartphone. I think it's quite a well-designed game. So that was quite enjoyable. And we also played a 3-player game of Heat Pedal to the Metal. And the first time I've revisited this actually since playing it, since the kind of initial buzz of the game. Much like the first time, it took me a little bit of time to get into it again, but halfway through the race, I was quite invested. I can see why, again, it was so well received. Because I think what I said the first time in my review or my comparison video with Flamme Rouge was that I preferred the kind of purity and the simplicity of Flamme Rouge. And when I played by the end of those games, I thought that Heat was better because all those extra layers made it more interesting. And I pretty much followed that same arc the second time, or the second session I played it, because I started thinking I'd probably rather play Flamme Rouge, and then by the end I'm thinking, no, this is cool. Some great kind of systems going on here, as you can clog up your deck with these kind of heat cards, and you've got this like push your luck system by going around the corners too fast. It's very well done, and I could definitely see why it's been such a kind of a fan favorite, I suppose. So that is Heat Pedal to the Metal. So that's all the games that I've been playing. Definitely mostly lighter stuff here. I think I've got a top 10 video releasing soon, as in like a top 10 games ranked. And there's some heavier games on those ones from my shelf of shame. So some of my kind of brain capacity has gone on to learning those more heavy games rather than playing my own heavy games in my collection. So hence why a lot of these are fillers. But if you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.